The Stanford Prison Experiment, SPE, was a notorious psychological study conducted by Philip Zimbardo and his team in 1971. The experiment aimed to investigate the psychological effects of power dynamics and social roles in a simulated prison environment. The study involved randomly assigning college students to either the role of guards or prisoners in a mock prison set up in the basement of Stanford University. The experiment was meant to last for 2 weeks, but it was terminated after just 6 days due to the extreme and abusive behavior of the guards towards the prisoners. The SPE gained widespread attention for its shocking findings and ethical controversies. It revealed how ordinary people could quickly adopt and internalize oppressive roles and engage in cruel and dehumanizing behavior towards others. The study also raised important questions about the role of situational factors in shaping behavior, the power of social roles, and the ethics of psychological research. The thesis statement for this podcast episode is that we will explore the key aspects and controversies of the SPE. This episode will delve into the design and background of the experiment, the reactions and behaviors of the participants, and the ethical implications and criticisms of the study. We will also reflect on the legacy of the SPE and its relevance for understanding human behavior and social dynamics today. By the end of this episode, you will have a deeper understanding of the SPE and its significance for psychology and society. Philip Zimbardo was a social psychologist who conducted the Stanford Prison Experiment, SPE, in 1971. Zimbardo was interested in understanding the psychological effects of power dynamics and social roles in institutional settings. He was particularly interested in how people adapt to new roles and how this might influence their behavior. The research question of the SPE was to investigate the psychological effects of power and authority in a simulated prison environment. Specifically, Zimbardo wanted to examine how individuals who were randomly assigned to play the role of either a guard or a prisoner would behave over time. The hypothesis was that the social roles assigned to the participants would have a significant impact on their behavior, and that the guards, in particular, would become increasingly abusive and authoritarian as they internalized their role. The experiment was designed to simulate a prison environment as closely as possible, with the aim of creating a sense of realism and inducing psychological stress in the participants. The study involved recruiting college students who were screened for psychological and physical health and randomly assigned to the role of guard or prisoner. The guards were given no training or guidelines on how to perform their role, while the prisoners were subjected to a series of humiliating and dehumanizing procedures, such as being stripped naked and given a prisoner number. The role of the guards was to maintain order and discipline in the prison, while the prisoners were expected to follow the rules and carry out assigned tasks. The guards were given complete control over the prisoners, with the power to punish and reward them as they saw fit. The experiment was designed to last for 2 weeks, but it was terminated after just 6 days due to the extreme and abusive behavior of the guards towards the prisoners. The initial phase of the Stanford Prison Experiment, SPE, began on August 14, 1971, with the 24 participants randomly divided into the roles of guards and prisoners. The guards, dressed in khaki uniforms and reflective sunglasses, were given billy clubs and whistles and instructed to maintain order in the prison. The prisoners, on the other hand, were dressed in smocks, wore a stocking cap on their heads, and were stripped of all personal belongings. They were referred to only by their assigned numbers. The first days of the experiment were characterized by tension and conflict between the guards and prisoners. The guards quickly asserted their authority, using intimidation tactics and physical punishment to establish dominance over the prisoners. They also imposed arbitrary rules and restrictions, such as forcing the prisoners to do push-ups and other physical exercises, and depriving them of basic needs like food, water, and sleep. The prisoners, in turn, became increasingly submissive and compliant, as they were subjected to humiliating and degrading treatment. Some began to show signs of psychological distress, including anxiety and depression. Some prisoners even started to identify with their assigned roles and forgot that it was just a simulation. Zimbardo and his team initially overlooked the abusive behavior of the guards, and instead attributed it to the stress of the situation. However, as the situation escalated, Zimbardo began to realize the extent of the abuse and the potential harm it could cause to the participants. He called a meeting with his colleagues and decided to terminate the experiment after just 6 days, instead of the intended 2 weeks. In the days that followed, the participants were debriefed and given counseling to help them process the experience. The SPE sparked a widespread controversy in the field of psychology, leading to debates over the ethics of the study and the implications of its findings. As the Stanford Prison Experiment, SPE, continued, the behavior of the guards and prisoners escalated to a level that was disturbing and unethical. The guards became increasingly abusive and authoritarian, while the prisoners became more passive and submissive. The guards began to assert their power over the prisoners in increasingly cruel ways. They imposed harsher punishments, such as making the prisoners stand in uncomfortable positions for long periods of time or denying them access to the bathroom. They also created a system of rewards and punishments that allowed them to manipulate the prisoners and create a sense of powerlessness. The most disturbing and unethical actions of the guards included physical abuse, sexual humiliation, and degradation. They forced the prisoners to perform sexual acts and engage in degrading behavior, such as simulating sex acts with each other. They also made the prisoners wear bags over their heads and deprived them of basic needs such as food and water. The psychological impact on the prisoners was severe. Many of them began to show signs of extreme stress and emotional distress, with some experiencing panic attacks and breakdowns. They were stripped of their identity and dignity, and many became depressed and anxious. Some even developed psychosomatic symptoms, such as rashes and headaches. The guards, on the other hand, became more aggressive and abusive over time, showing a clear sense of entitlement and sadism. They enjoyed the power and control they had over the prisoners, and many of them even began to dehumanize the prisoners by referring to them as it or bitch. The escalation of abusive behavior in the SPE demonstrated the power of social roles and the impact they can have on behavior. It also highlighted the importance of ethical considerations in psychological research, and the need for informed consent and protection of human subjects. The Stanford Prison Experiment, SPE, has faced several criticisms over the years. One of the main criticisms is that it lacked scientific rigor and had poor research methodology. Critics argue that the experiment lacked proper controls, and that the results were influenced by demand characteristics, where the participants behaved in ways they believed were expected of them. Another criticism is that the experiment was unethical and caused psychological harm to the participants. The participants were subjected to emotional and physical abuse, and their consent was not adequately obtained. In response to the criticisms, Zimbardo and his team have defended the experiment by stating that it was never intended to be a scientific study, but rather a simulation of prison life. They argue that the study raised important ethical considerations in psychological research and highlighted the power of social roles. The SPE has had a significant impact on psychology and society. It has been widely discussed and debated, and has influenced research in fields such as social psychology, criminology, and ethics. The experiment has also led to changes in research guidelines and ethical considerations in psychological research. The legacy of the SPE has sparked ongoing debates about the role of power and authority in society, and the potential for abuse of power. The Stanford Prison Experiment, SPE, was a controversial study that demonstrated the power of social roles and the impact they can have on behavior. The experiment has faced criticism over the years, particularly for its methodology and ethical considerations. Throughout the experiment, the behavior of the guards and prisoners escalated to a disturbing and unethical level, leading to severe psychological harm for the prisoners. The study highlighted important ethical considerations in psychological research, and sparked ongoing debates about the role of power and authority in society. Today, the relevance of the SPE continues to be debated. While some argue that the study has significant implications for our understanding of social behavior and the abuse of power, others criticize its methodology and generalizability to real-world situations. Regardless of one's stance on the SPE, it is important to engage critically with psychological research and its implications. This means being aware of potential ethical concerns and the power dynamics at play in research studies. By critically examining psychological research, we can gain a deeper understanding of the complexities of human behavior and work towards creating a more just and equitable society.